welcome to the show. I'm Sal.
I'm Ethan.
We saw these like culminations of franchises. We saw like Endgame for a lot of people was like, well, that's the end of Marvel. For me, good job.
Right.
And you know,
Right. There's nothing else they're building towards, so
no.
I'm gonna walk away.
And there isn't.
True.
Like they're building,
Well,
but like towards more money. Like there's no plan. There's no
Right.
grand scheme.
Well, maybe there is, but
I doubt
you
it.
can't tell what it is.
No, yeah, exactly. There's no clear defined path.
Yeah.
And the same with Star Wars, the same with anything, and much in the same way that it is with comic books. And that's what the channel is usually about, so we're going to kind of tie it back into there. But it's more that like media itself has become this like splintered niche tribalist thing that like everyone has just found and they squirrel it away. Like, what was it, Red Notice? Apparently had more views than Endgame. It was some show on Netflix.
Yeah, I vaguely remember.
Right, but more people watched it than saw like the movie that everyone in the world saw, and so like, how is that possible if I've never heard of it? You know,
Right.
But
right.
everyone has their own thing that they are like the keepers of, and it's no longer become this like national or like larger than life conversation that everyone can be a part of.
Yeah, I've seen that that argument before in terms of like TV shows and HBO specifically.
Yeah.
Where like Game of Thrones when it came out was like this big thing.
Yep.
And I actually remember people at work like talking about like the episode of Game of Thrones. Of
course.
And I was like, oh, I gotta check this out. But this article was like noting the numbers of people that actually watched it and compared them to people who'd watched The Big Bang Theory.
Oh my God.
The Big Bang Theory audience dwarfed by
Game of
like,
Thrones, yeah.
many times the Game of Thrones audience,
Sure.
and yet like didn't, wasn't a topic of discussion in the same way. So it's like, okay, so there's this thing out there that like, people know of the Big Bang Theory and talking about it, but like,
But actually, you're watching it.
yeah, and
Like,
it's
actually
like,
everyone's watching.
right, and I didn't watch it.
No.
I knew nothing about what was going on with it, and probably they would say the same thing, those people about Game of
Game of
Thrones.
Thrones, exactly.
And there's a million other things now. You know,
Yeah.
that was back when it seemed like it was like relatively less diversified. 'Cause
Yes.
There weren't as many like prestige TV
like
channels.
shows, yeah, because everything that is a streaming service like has their own like, as you said, prestige thing, like their
Right.
own like tentpole piece that like brings people in. For Paramount Plus, obviously it's just the Star Trek brand for no good reason.
Right. Disney Plus has their Star Wars
and Marvel. Yeah.
There's more people to create and consume content.
Yeah.
So therefore there will be more content available.
Right.
But if there's more content available, that means you have more options to pick from.
Yes.
So I would say that probably like the audience for stuff might not get below a certain level because like it still has to be profitable, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's not worth doing if it doesn't reach a certain number.
Right. So but the total audience should be larger over
Technically,
time.
yes.
And, and I don't know if that's true, but if you look at like total number, well, we can't.
No, we
tell,
can't.
right?
That's the
Because we don't
thing.
know who's watching.
Yeah. Anything at any given
on
time.
streaming, But if you were to add up all the hours watched, I'm sure it's much, much, much higher than it was like 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Even though there's less in common.
Right, because that's the thing is like I remember reading the statistic about like the last episode of MASH and how it's like it still hasn't been beaten. The amount of single people watching one thing at the same time, and I'm like, yeah, that's over. Those
And it
days are
probably
over,
never will be,
and it never will be
because
like,
there's so many more options.
Exactly,
now.
and it's like that doesn't mean that there are fewer people watching TV. It just means there are fewer people watching the same TV,
Right,
or the
it's
same
all spread
content
out.
at the same time. Exactly, but that also kind of like changes the whole nature of the business because like the only way you can get away with having like $200 million movies is because everyone's going to see them. But
Right.
like if you still make $1 billion off of a $200 million movie, but half the audience now versus like 50 years ago is watching, can that be sustained?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bigger problem for movies than for anything else.
Certainly.
Because movies are so expensive.
Exactly. But they all seem to be, I think we've reached like the ceiling as far as how much movies can cost. Like,
Maybe.
they look the same. Like, any blockbuster from 10 years ago, 15 years ago looks pretty much just as good as it did now. And if it cost over $200 million.
Yeah, digital effects.
But it never costs more
perhaps.
than $3 unless it's Endgame, which is a different animal. Endgame,
Right.
I think, is a different animal. You can't, because Endgame was like the culmination of 10 years worth of movies. It's got the juggernaut of like Disney plus the Marvel Studios. Like there's a lot going on with that movie to be like, oh no, yeah. Like I think that Endgame probably cost like $500 million. It's like, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
no, movies don't usually do that.
No, they don't.
And Spider-Man No Way Home proved that like you don't need to spend $500 million to make $1 billion.
Yeah, that's true.
Like at all.
Yeah.
All you need is a couple Spider-Men in their movie.
Yeah, I don't know as much about the comic side. Like, is that happening with
Yeah,
comics?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Yeah, the comic book industry is responding in a weird way because like they always do, where it's just like
But there's still only two major.
There's still
companies
there
that
are
have,
still
like,
the
a
two big,
huge
yeah,
portion.
the big two, but they're approaching the business, the audience, the medium in such a different way than they used to, and it's like not fascinating anymore. Like it used to be fascinating because it was just like, oh, it was these names and these titans, these characters almost like Dan DiDio and like Joe Quesada, and like some of those people still work there, but like they don't have the same impact, nor do they have the same influence over that because like they've become these IP farms.
Are they producing more total types of content?
I'd say that there are more books being produced now than there ever have been, but for and I just read recently, like today, there was from a website called Comicron, which like tries to track all the data from sales and stuff, that there are more comics being sold today than ever before. Like there are still like more, and the industry like did better this year versus last year, and this does not include manga numbers. So all the manga people who are like, well, you need compared to like, no, forget. We're not talking about manga right now.
Right.
So this is a totally different animal.
Western comics.
Western comics. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's really interesting because we talk about like, oh, this book only sold like this many. This book only sold this many. It's
well, it's funny because I always see the same number. Like it's not like, oh, well, each year the highest selling book sells like 10% more. Nope. It's always the same number. It's always between 150 and 200,000.
But if you're comparing to like the heights of the 90s, it looks like every book is doing like terribly.
Yes.
But that's maybe not the right way to look at it because
well, inflation and
well, yeah, but if there's a diversification of the number of titles,
exactly,
then what you really want to do is add up all the titles and see, you know, what are the total numbers being sold if you want to look at like the health of the industry.
Absolutely.
I guess the problem with that though is like, yeah, but you need more content creators.
Yeah, and they don't have. Well, they
gotta
do
get paid. So like,
there's a lot of problems there because like number one, we don't have any money to pay them. Number two, you know, I need to reliably hire people who can consistently produce on time.
Yeah.
And while there is, I'm sure, a huge amount of unseen, you know, next level talent out there, the industry will often defer to a like lesser but still known quantity because they can produce versus somebody who's like unknown but maybe might be better in some way.
Right.
And that's just the nature of the beast. It's because they produce on a monthly basis. Now that means maybe the industry needs to change, but that's another topic.
Yeah, I think comics have a problem maybe wherein like, I mean it's the same thing for any media where the fewer people consume your product, the harder it is to make it because it takes the same number of people to make a thing.
Exactly.
You know, so
like, that hasn't changed.
Declining numbers per book of purchasers is a problem for, you still got the same number of artists and writers on that book. And they still got to make a living.
Oh yeah, and you see it all the time, even with like AAA selling titles. Like you have books that are like the #1 book of that publisher, like Spider-Man, and you'll see like a month-to-month book. And then suddenly there'll be 3 artists on that title inexplicably. And it's just because they need someone else or 2 other someone else's to fill in to do the work of what used to be just one team.
Yeah. And because you've got Netflix.
And the competition is steep.
Well, but what I'm trying to get at is like people expect it now.
Right.
So like people expect to be able to find a thing that is like specific to their tastes and their interests. So like comics almost don't have like a choice except to like cater to like these disparate different audiences because everyone just wants that. And can get it everywhere else. So,
anywhere else. And you would assume that those other places are spending more because like it costs more to make a TV show or movie than it does to make a comic book.
That's true. I wonder if the cost isn't coming down because like digital effects are so
ubiquitous.
Like, and like they've kind of like gotten it down to a science.
I think
now.
they have,
Like computing power has continued to decrease in cost per
Well, plus like the discerning audience has changed their opinion. Like it used to be, you'd see the Scorpion King and you'd laugh. Now it's like, well, it's a TV show. You got to give them.
So I wonder if TV is not kind of creating a problem for comics, where it's like, well, comics are going to cost what they cost to produce, at least the physical copies.
It's always going to cost.
And there's a machine like printing it, and there's a guy like drawing it. Unless you can come up with like savings.
Yeah, and there's no real way to save it unless you like cut down on what, like paying your audience or paying your creators. You have to either increase costs on your customer, or you have to like, I don't know, change things like cut like maybe printing costs or And that's the solution ultimately at the end of the day is like if you want comics to cost less but still be as good, like you need to like something's got to give.
You either need more people buying the book.
Which
or you need to spend less on the book. Somewhere
there's got to be cost cut somewhere. But when it comes to the niching of like comic books, like that's a big problem because like they're not. Yeah, it's great on one hand because it's like, yay, there are comics for everybody. There's literally a comic book for everybody out there. but there's also a greater likelihood that it'll get canceled because it's just unsustainably expensive. But
and more so like a situation where like some book is like supporting another book.
Yes.
Right. Like there's probably a lot more books that are like losing money.
Oh yeah.
You know, or barely breaking even, and the only reason they can do that is because they've got a few like tentpole titles like Batman or whatever.
Yep. Oh, Batman keeps up the entire DC line, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that like the one Batman title, it's that Batman the character supports the line. And when I say it supports the line, I don't even mean that like that's how it should be. It's like that's the direction that DC has gone in. They're like, this is the proven track record. And unfortunately, when it comes to like month-to-month comics, where it's like it takes a while to draw the damn thing and get it out. You have to make this. It's like people saying like, how come The Simpsons wasn't as topical as South Park? And I'm like, well, it's faster to make an episode of South Park than it is to make The Simpsons. And it's like, by the time that the comic book artist is aware of like the changing of the winds, the book's already been drawn. So you know, to switch gears like that, you either need to then you got to bring in another artist, and it just adds more costs.
Or do what South Park did and have like such like
just an
standardization of the way that they do it. Like they do it all on computers, and they're just very simple little drawings, and they just move them around.
And that's not. I think that would destroy the nature of the comic industry itself. So it's like,
why would you get a comic book if it looked like that?
Why bother? There's no more excitement or enthusiasm about any particular thing that's happening because like. Number one, there's just a diversified audience to the point where like no one or two people can agree on one thing.
Everyone's so distracted by so many other things. No matter how hard I try, I probably can't even.
I'm not gonna be able to penetrate that conversation unless it's something like massive, like maybe Batman's Wedding. I remember when like the Wedding of Batman came out, and that was a huge deal, and there were like midnight releases, and people were getting married in comic book stores. Then you open it up and find out he's not actually getting married, and it's like, oh my god! Not only was like the bait and switch kind of like, holy crap, like was that a nut punch? But also like that's you can't have Batman get married every week. Like that's not enough. And I remember
like you can't kill Superman.
You can't kill Superman every week. But Superman was killing Superman was a big deal, and it was a stunt, and it did get people into stores. But like, and then it's like, and the comic book industry responded by creating events, and then being like, okay, every year there will be Civil War was really the thing that did that. Though. Civil War was if we have one event every year that gets in the New York Times or in some kind of other news source that like disseminates into the audience, we will do great.
Yeah, but they don't.
Well,
like,
they don't anymore.
Get to Civil War levels of hype. I'm guessing every subsequent event after that got less and less mainstream media attention.
And I can imagine at like any news desk, they'd be like, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, like, enough.
Yeah, no.
With the one that was, you got your one. Yeah. That was enough for us.
Yeah, last time I checked, like, Civil War didn't change everything.
I mean, it did, but like...
Well, yeah, but like, okay, but like, no one...
But not in a way that I can...
people really died.
Yeah,
like,
is this just a casualty and the comic book industry needs to respond in kind? Like, and if they are responding in kind, I don't think that the movie industry, the comic book industry, the TV industry, the music industry, I don't think they're doing it right. Like, I think that they are just reacting. I think everything is reactive to the fact that, like, everyone is tribal and like curating their playlists of content. And they're just like, okay, well, we'll just make as much as we can. And it's like, dude, that's not sustainable. Well, it's not financially viable. And eventually it's going to recede. Like we talked about the, like how many streaming services there are and how it's like, they're outspending each other. They're spending like the gross national incomes of like small countries to make these things, to produce content that they also can't afford. And it's like, eventually, like most of these people are not fighting to be the next streaming service. They're fighting to be the last streaming service. Because eventually it's going to...
They'll went into debt to do this.
Right. Like those debts are going to be called in one day and like there's only going to be like 2 streaming services left. Like,
probably, yeah.
Right? Like it's all because the Netflix model only worked because it was the only one.
Yeah.
Like everyone went to Netflix, everyone went to and people like Netflix because it was the one place to go.
Yeah, but I would argue even if that happens, there's so much content on any one of these platforms.
Yeah.
Well, at least if you look at like Netflix
just any of them.
Disney
like
Plus, like
the top 5.
Yeah, and there's so much stuff on Netflix. I mean, Netflix is ridiculous. There's so much stuff on there that like I'd be like, oh, I'd watch that. Oh, I'd watch that. There's like a dozen shows that like I would watch, but I haven't.
Right.
So like,
and that's on one.
That's just one platform.
Yeah.
So I feel like even if you do get down to like a couple streaming services,
oh, you're gonna whittle down the content
still
too.
I don't think so.
Well, you're gonna have the glut of content that had been created during the streaming wars, but after that, they're gonna be like, okay, well, now that there's only 2 of us, you're gonna get like maybe like we're gonna get back to like every 2 years there'll be a Breaking Bad. Like we're not doing it that way.
I don't know. You still got the whole industry of like making TV shows. I
think
like all the actors and all the people who are who need work.
You're gonna have to tighten your bootstraps. I mean, like I'm serious. I feel this kind of like desperate kind of like tension in the air, and not like for me because I don't create content that is sustainable on like a streaming service, but like in the comic book industry, these comic book creators, like why they took the Substack deals and why they're so hell-bent on making this independent book that's going to be made into a TV show right now. Because they like know in 5 years that option will not be on the table. Like right now, like everyone is competing to get some. It doesn't matter if it's like good or even critically acclaimed, but as long as it's established and it's made by a creator and not just like us farming something out and hoping that people will watch it, then it'll get picked up. As opposed to like in 5 or 10 years when there is there's only 2 services and they're like, oh, we got plenty of content. I mean, Disney Plus exists because there's a backlog. Just because they bought Fox and they're like, well, we're good. We got a gazillion movies and we make 2 shows a year. I mean, like they make more than that, but like the 2 water cooler shows, they make a Marvel show, a Star Wars show, and a Jeff Goldblum show I'm not watching. You know, like there's all kinds of other shit, but they don't make nearly as much as like Netflix does. In terms of production.
That's true.
Because they have the backlog. And it's like if you're the last streaming service, you're gonna have like 1,000 movies and TV shows, and then you're on your honor to make what. 2-3 shows a year. Especially if one's successful. Oh, we'll just keep making that show.
But what if you? I mean, it's not that hard to stream stuff over the internet. So the thing is, like, I feel like Netflix always has to be looking out for someone. Even let's suppose that like everything dies back except for Disney Plus. Well, then there will be a vacuum. And if Netflix doesn't keep producing large amounts of content that satisfy every niche and interest, then there's gonna be other people being like, I'm going to launch my own platform, to fill that gap.
But then you see it's easier said than done. Like you look at like YouTube. YouTube keeps shitting the bed like every year, and everyone keeps talking about how it's like there is no competitor. Like the reason why YouTube gets away with being so shitty is because there's literally no competitor, and it's like it would cost $1 trillion to be a competitor to YouTube. Like the barrier to entry to actually become a competitor. So it's like if there is like Netflix, Disney Plus, and maybe like one more, and that's it, and someone's like, I'll make my own. It's like, okay, do you have $1 trillion to compete? I mean, you don't really need it. You could just like have you could be like the next, hot creator who makes something that's just going to speak to a generation and just have a cell phone and like a great audio setup, and you've made this thing and you don't need a set. You just get, and then there's a bidding war to get you. But that's one. It's not like that's not a content farm. And Netflix only makes those things because they think they need to do that. I think Netflix's like whole thing is a fallacy. I think they're like we need to make shows, and it's like how often do I hear how shitty everything on Netflix is? Like every day I'm like, there's another shitty movie or another horrible show or another show that was great that they canceled after 2 seasons. And it's like they only make them because they think they need to.
But think about how shitty TV used to be.
Like
well,
it still probably is.
And it still is. That's the thing. Like people are like fine with content that is like not that great.
Well, they just leave it on and just let it wash over them, I guess. I mean, well, but watching habits I think have evolved over the last 20 years.
I think what's happened in TV, in my mind, is that TV has cannibalized movies. So like, like a lot of the like high quality content that used to be only in the domain of movies. Some of that has migrated onto the small.
That happened from like True Detective onward, where people were like, where it was low for movie stars to be on TV shows, and then it was like, oh, actually, I get paid more. And I get to like do more, and I'm actually more visible.
And writers got to use a more like long form format. So there was like
it wasn't as like hacky, or they didn't have to distill any story. They could have the breadth to tell.
And without commercials, it's like suddenly it's a little more interesting for a creator to produce content for that. And I think really The Sopranos was like the start of that, but there wasn't the infrastructure to support like multiple simultaneous Sopranos.
Sopranos is one of those things where it's like a great template. Like if The Sopranos had come out today, it would still be hugely successful. But it just existed in this time when that springboarded HBO into stardom to the point where like, people were like, I need to buy HBO just to watch this one show. And it became that water cooler show we were talking about earlier.
So you think that it's going to come back?
I think
the water cooler show.
I think it's like a rubber band and it has to snap back. I think it's unsustainable. I think human fatigue and human like interest. Like look at how fickle everybody is and how like just on YouTube viewing and alone, people who are like subscribed to a channel who like a channel, after a while like you just lose interest. Like you reach a point and you're just like I'm out. You don't even say I'm out. You just stop. Maybe you have a pile of shows or a playlist of videos you want to watch, and it just becomes so insurmountable you just don't.
Yes.
That happens in the comic book industry all the time. Comic book readers who are like,
Yeah.
they have a pull list, or like they get they have something happen in their lives, they can't afford it, or they need to take a break, and then when they come back, their comic books retailers like, you have 80 comic books, and they're all $5.
Right.
And then it's just like, and there's so many stories of them like just literally abandoning their comic book store.
Yeah.
But which is horrible, and I hate
well,
it. But like that's the human condition. That's what people do. And I think that at this point, like eventually, there's going to be a point where it's like let's say you're a pop culture junkie. Just not even like I like superheroes. No, okay, I've got you covered. No, I'm a pop culture junkie. I like it all. Eventually, you're just going to reach a point where you're going to go, I think I'm going to take up bird watching.
Well, the only people that could be a true pop culture junkie, I feel like at this point, are the ones who are like reviewing and like discussing it professionally.
Right.
Because
but like,
who else has time?
But
to
isn't
watch
that messed
all
up? Because
stuff?
that also creates an industry. That's a cottage industry itself. Like now, I only watch people who watch pop culture stuff. Like, and which ones? Because there's no barrier to entry to do that.
Well, I think I see a similar thing with video games.
Yeah.
Like I don't play video games anymore. And I feel like there's a lot of people who don't. Well, I play like one video game a year.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people who like watch other people play video games professionally.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
like, I don't have time to put in that. That's like 120 hours of my life
Yeah.
going in that game. I can't do that.
No.
Or I can only do that like a couple times a year. But the rest of the time, I just watch somebody else do it.
Yeah. But that's you could be playing the game while they're like instead of
Well,
watching
yeah,
them
but
do it.
I don't watch every set. You know, I tune in and out. I watch
Right.
little bits in here. I'm not playing the whole thing.
Yeah,
so I
that's
can
true.
like cover the breadth of gaming content a
Yes.
little better
Right.
than if I had to actually like play through the whole thing myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Like, is that happening
I think that's
everywhere?
happening.
Is that just how people want content now?
Yeah, I think so.
So everyone's just gonna like sample little bits of everything everywhere.
Oh
now.
yeah. Well, in the comic book industry, that's how people work. I mean, like, why do you think Comic Historian has 2.5 million subscribers, but there aren't 2.5 million comic book readers?
Right.
And
Why does
that's
Netflix
only-
cancel half their shows after one season?
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, didn't get the numbers, it's done.
Right. Well, I think they cancel shows that even have the numbers, but they're just like, well, no, we did it. Like,
Yeah.
people were talking about us, and that's the other big problem. That's the thing I'm glad we got a chance to actually cover, is the problem of the half-life of any number of entertainment media has halved, if not more, in our lifetime. Where it's like, you can't just talk about a show for more than a week. You can't talk about a new movie for more than 3 days.
Yeah.
A comic book, the time to review it, discuss it, at least in our world, the day it comes out, that's pretty much it.
Right.
After that, no one cares.
Right. And it's going to take months for the story arc that it's part of to play
conclude.
out.
Yeah.
And who the heck is still going to be
Who's
paying
even
attention by
reading
the end
that?
of it?
Yeah. No, it's which and you see some efforts to fix it or deal with it. Netflix, of course, like just because they had the shows, were like, let's just put it all out.
Right.
And it created the binge culture.
Yeah.
Disney Plus was like, no, I spent way too much money on the show to just give it all to you right now. I saw what happened to like Daredevil and stuff. We're not doing that. So instead, they're like, it's week to week. So people are talking about it for a week, which worked out at least for like the commentary industry.
Yeah.
I hope it's working out for the audience. I know it does for me. I actually feel really good about it because sometimes I feel like, like I don't want to watch a whole show right now, or I don't have the time, or if everybody else did and I didn't, I'm like, no, screw it. I guess I'll never watch it.
Right. So the analog in the comic book industry would be a thing that they don't do, which is just release a book as
Just
a
release
trade
a trade
versus,
paperback.
you
Yeah,
know,
an original graphic
spread
novel
it
as opposed to a
out.
month to month.
Yeah.
Which
Well, I guess
think
they do it because they have books that are conceived as an entire
They
work.
do, but even then they're broken up. Like, it's so rare to see an original graphic novel produced by, especially by Big Two, but by anybody.
Right.
Where it's just like, here's the whole thing, enjoy.
Right.
That's so rare.
Yeah. Well, probably because they think, well, I'll get more money.
Oh, they know
if
it.
I spread it out.
Well, the reality is, I mean, like the way that it works is, month to month, I'm spending, you're spending $5 or $6 per issue. Let's say the book's got at least 6 issues, so that's 4 times 6 is 24. Then you sell the trade paperback, which is going to be about, for Marvel, $35.
Yeah.
That's another $35. Then the hardcover it usually comes out first. That's $45. Like, so yeah. I mean, if you're a hardcore comic book reader, you're buying all of them.
Right.
So I got you across the board. Plus variant covers. Yeah, no. Like there is still a game to be played in the month-to-month business. Like that is not dead.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, so where do you see it going?
Snapping
do you think
back.
It's going to snap back?
I think it's got to snap
back. Do you
back.
think the comic book industry needs to do anything, or just wait?
Just wait it out? I mean, like, I usually don't believe in the wait and see attitude for too long. I think that there's something to be said for that. Marvel does that very well. They love for DC to wait for DC to throw their hat over the wall every single time.
Right.
They're like, how'd that work out? Not so good. Won't do that.
Right. It's not time yet.
Right. It's not time yet.
Yeah, we're gonna wait.
We want to.
People aren't ready.
We want you to know how much we admire our friends over at DC Comics and their ingenuity, but we just feel like the audience just isn't ready for that right now.
So what you think is probably definitely not going to happen is that they are organically going to go to trying to pull everything back together and do major events like based on like what's happening in the story.
No.
Never that.
No. Why would they do that? I definitely don't see the comic book industry making any like sweepingly good decisions. I mean, I would love to see them like make some kind of efforts, but like even then, I don't. The snapback, like I do expect that to happen. I don't expect it because Disney Plus making shows week to week is an artificial restriction.
Yeah.
That they're engineering.
The whole show's made.
Yeah.
There's no reason.
There's no reason to do that except because you want to artificially create scarcity.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine, but like you're basically just doing the old way of doing it because you don't want to lose out on like money.
Right.
It's not a really good reason to do it. It is a good reason to do it, but it's not a good reason like culturally speaking.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to like your average content creator or content consumer.
Right.
But
and there's some people who really don't like that. They get really annoyed. They're
oh
like,
yeah.
I just want to be able to like keep watching the thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to actually wait on it until the whole thing's out and then binge it.
Right.
And then you're like losing the effect of like generating the buzz.
Absolutely.
Those people aren't even watching it.
Yeah. But I don't think that like that's the solution, but I think it is part of it because I don't believe in deliberately hindering progress just to make it so that like things
Just
go
to manipulate
slower.
people.
Yeah, like I find that to be repugnant, but
Right.
But I do think that like it does help in its own way because it does introduce at least an opportunity. Like people can experience that. It's not like an old man with a stick has to say like there used to be that they would make them once a week. Like there's an experience they're having that is exposing them to that experience, so that when it snaps back, they're not like, "What the hell?"
Yeah. I do think there is something to be said for like everybody watching the same thing at the same time, which you can't do if everything's just dropped all at once, because like everyone's not going to be sitting there waiting or have the time to watch 10 hours of TV content. So like the fact that you have someone trying to space it out means that you could conceivably have someone get on board, after like episode 3, and be like, okay, everyone's talking about this, I guess I'll start watching it, and then you're doing it like together.
Exactly.
There is value in that.
I think there
really like that.
Yeah.
That said, like I don't quite do it.
No.
Like Hawkeye, I tried to keep up with, but I just couldn't, and so like I watched.
Fell off.
Like stuff comes up, and like you just kind of like get used to it, and then you just deal with it.
Yeah. with respect to Hawkeye, I think the big problem with some of those shows, specifically Hawkeye, Boba Fett, Mando, they really need to. This is a P&Q they could take from a comic book industry.
Yeah.
They should number them and be like, you know how many people knew there were 6 episodes of Hawkeye? Like every time I would say, like, well, it's 6 episodes. People go, what?
Yeah, I had no idea.
And I'm like, really? You don't know there's only 6 episodes?
Yeah.
Because
I
like
didn't know.
we gotta like.
I just am used to there being like 10 episodes and stuff, but I guess that's not really the case
No,
anymore.
it could be any arbitrary number now because
no,
episodes are like 43 minutes or 54 minutes. Like, it's ridiculous. But knowing that there is an end game and knowing that that maybe it's shorter than you think might create an opportunity in your head to go, oh, it's only 6 episodes.
I could probably commit to that.
Yeah.
To watching it, the night that it comes out.
Exactly. Like, no, maybe I'll catch it at midnight, or maybe I'll catch it in the morning.
I can see that happen. I'm not there yet, where I'm like actually doing that. But like, if I knew that like most shows were,
but they need to make it more available.
Yeah. I think if you have some of these streaming companies die in the next 5 years, then I think you will get back to more event type shows.
Yeah.
Because there just won't be as much available, and so people will end up watching the same thing. And I also think it's like an avalanche effect where like the more people are watching something, the more people will watch it because they're spreading the word about it. Well, now it's like the most decentralized I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
Well, like literally only the people like I talk to all the time will I take
watching
any
the same
recommendations
thing.
from or even possibly be watching the same thing.
Totally. totally.
So I don't know when it's going to snap back, but I think it will.
I think it'll take time.
I don't think we're ever going to go back to where we were, though.
No, those days are over only because that's not the nature of the industry anymore, or any of those industries.
And I think there's just too much. I mean, there's literally content from like South Korea, China.
Well, and them becoming international phenomena.
Yeah. So there's just, I don't think there's any going back from the fact that there's just going to always be a lot more content than there was in the 80s.
Yes.
Like that's just, there's more people, there's more studios, there's more everything.
Yep.
So we're not going to get to that point.
We'll
where
never get
literally
back to
the
that.
whole country is watching
one thing. Yeah.
Which is too bad.
Yeah, I feel like that's too bad because you're losing. I think you're losing something of the human condition. You're losing of the human experience that was beautiful because, unlike like dying or giving birth or whatever, like that's part of the human experience that's intrinsically like biological as opposed to like something we've created.
Right.
We made this.
Yeah.
We all decided we're gonna look at a previously recorded thing and pretend like it's happening to us right now. And we're all gonna watch it.
Yeah.
Like, apparently that MASH thing, it was the single most amount of toilets flushed in America at one time. Like, it's,
Right, because everyone was running to the bathroom
Everyone had to go to
during
the-
the commercial.
Yeah,
which is another thing that doesn't exist.
Oh yeah,
anymore.
commercials. Well, thank goodness. Like I've hated commercials since the get-go. In terms of, I'm glad that Snyder brought it up. I don't know why he did. He just was like, I was just thinking about this. It's kind of messed up, isn't it weird?
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah,
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no easy solution, obviously. And
Right.
In terms of the comic book industry, it's like I don't know. Like, here's the thing: the comic book industry will not be the first ones to innovate or come up with a new solution.
No.
But they might be the last ones to implement them. Mm-hmm. And the problem is they're so insulated and so different from everything else, despite the fact that they are subject to the same rules and ideas and consumption habits. They might actually not apply the same way.
Right. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. It'll
Right?
be interesting to see, do they follow
The same.
everyone else
Yeah.
in terms of how they adapt to what people are doing in other forms of media, or do they just kind of do their own thing? And does it even matter?
Does it
what
even
they
matter?
do, or will their numbers just kind of be the same no matter what?
I feel like they'll be the same because there's no cultural effort made by the Western comic book industry to normalize comic books.
Yeah.
Even to the point where the IPs are used in media that everyone's watching or absorbing.
Right.
There's still no considered
If there
effort.
was going to be a lot of cross-pollination from the movies into comics,
It would have
happened way before
It would have
now.
happened after Iron Man.
Yeah.
Not much less Endgame, the
Yeah.
largest movie ever made.
Yeah.
No.
It's not happening.
It's not
going to happen.
And if it's not going to come from there, you better come up with some ideas. Your Big Brother movies is not going to be is not going to hold the door open for you.
Yeah.
You better come up with another way to get in. I don't know what that is, but I don't work there, so
It's really not my problem.
not really not my problem. I'm just talking about it.
Yeah.
But hopefully we've inspired some ideas, and if you have some thoughts, let us know in the comments below this video, and we'll keep the conversation going.
Yeah, join the conversation.
Right? Yeah, and like and subscribe. Click that bell for notifications.
Smash that like button.
God knows I'm competing with 1,000 other heavy bearded people who are
Yeah.
just trying to talk about something.
Maybe we need to do events.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we need.
Big
We need
tentpole
to
events.
create
I don't think that's-
comic pop events.
I don't think anyone's gonna watch that.
What?
I think even our audience will be like, what?
We got to generate buzz.
Yeah, generate buzz. Yes.
Yeah.
Buzz is important. How to do it is the real elusive problem.
Well, maybe you can give us some ideas. What are
Yes.
some
Yeah. How come
events
we're
we
not
can-
doing so good? See you guys next time with another episode. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Sal.
And I'm Ethan.
So long.